Whale attacked by millions of barnacles. When rescue team arrived, it did something shocking. The whale lay still, its enormous body drifting aimlessly in the vast, open ocean. Beneath the surface, the weight of countless barnacles clung to its flesh. There was no movement, no familiar rhythm of life. It was a sign of something wrong, something deeply unsettling. The team first spotted the whale from a distance, its immense form rising and falling slowly with the ocean's pulse. But something was off. It wasn't moving the way it should. The sea around it seemed still, as if the very water sensed the creature's struggle. As they approached, the sight was haunting. The barnacles, millions of them, attached to the whale's back, its fins, and even its face. These weren't the usual few that clung to the skin of a whale in the wild. These were masses, forming a layer of armor-like growth that encased it. The whale's skin had turned pale in the places where the barnacles were particularly thick, the weight and pressure from the infestation making it appear exhausted. It wasn't just an injury. It was a slow and painful suffocation. The barnacles were cutting into its flesh and the weight was unbearable. The whale had grown still, a state that was both unnatural and heartbreaking to see in such a majestic creature. The rescue team moved quietly, knowing that any sudden movement could cause further distress. The ocean was calm, but the whale's labored breathing told a different story. The rescuers gently approached, their boat bobbing slightly in the water, creating ripples that felt too loud in the vast quiet around them. As they closed in, they whispered among themselves. A plan was forming, but their minds were full of uncertainty. Was the whale even conscious? Was it too far gone to help? There was no way to know. Their hearts beat heavy in their chests, but they were committed to doing what they could. The whale stirred slightly, its body rocking gently with the small movements of the sea, but it did not try to flee. It felt like it had surrendered to the helplessness of its situation, trusting the water to carry it to its end. The soft hum of the rescue boat's engine sliced through the calm of the ocean, a stark contrast to the stillness that had engulfed the whale. The rescuers, now in close proximity, surveyed the situation before them. The barnacles were everywhere, covering the whale's back, trailing along its fins and even accumulating around its face. A sharp contrast to the usual sparse attachments that marine creatures like whales carry. These barnacles weren't just a minor inconvenience. They were a visible sign of suffering, an invasion that had gone unchecked for too long. The team moved with deliberate care. There was no room for haste. Each movement had to be precise, respectful, and careful not to worsen the situation. One of the rescuers, a quiet figure with years of experience, was the first to reach out. He gently placed his hand on the whale's skin. The texture was rough from the barnacle's mass and years of growth, but underneath, the skin still held warmth, a reminder that this whale was not beyond saving. With a quiet, almost reverent gesture, he reached for the first barnacle. It was large and stubbornly fixed to the whale's skin. The tools they used were specifically designed for delicate operations, not forcing, but rather coaxing the barnacle free from its host. With each careful twist of the tool, the barnacle loosened, finally coming free. The moment it released, the whale stirred slightly. The movement was so subtle, so brief, but it was enough to make the team pause. Did the whale feel it? Did it recognize that the relief had begun? The rescuers exchanged quiet looks. The whale had not tried to flee. It had not struggled. The weight of the barnacles had been immense, but now, with each barnacle removed, the whale was showing signs of life once more. Its breathing, labored and heavy before, was becoming less frantic, more measured. Another barnacle was removed, then another. The whale shifted slightly with each removal, its body adjusting to the newfound space as the weight of the barnacles slowly lifted. Despite the pain that must have come with the removal, the whale seemed to submit to the process, as if it had long ago given up fighting the battle alone. The ocean around them was a vast, silent witness to this quiet struggle for survival. The crew worked in unison, their movements synchronized like the quiet rhythm of a dance, a delicate operation to restore the balance between life and death. Hours passed in a hushed calm, the boat drifting with the gentle sway of the ocean, while the team painstakingly peeled away the layers of the barnacle infestation. Each piece removed was a small victory, but also a reminder of just how long the whale had suffered beneath its burden. There were times when the whale's skin bled slightly, a natural consequence of the barnacle's removal. But the team was prepared for it. They worked with utmost care, avoiding any unnecessary roughness, treating the whale's body with the same compassion they would have for any living creature. It wasn't just about removing the barnacles. It was about respecting the whale's endurance, the trust it placed in them as they worked. The team had no way of knowing whether the whale fully understood what was happening, but its subtle shifts, the slight easing of tension in its massive form, gave them hope. As the last barnacle was finally removed, the crew let out a collective breath. The whale, now free from the oppressive weight of the infestation, remained still for a long moment. It felt as though the ocean itself held its breath. Then, as if to acknowledge the relief, the whale made a sound. It wasn't a cry or a vocalization, but something quieter, a soft, almost imperceptible exhale like a sigh of release carried on the waves. It wasn't a sound of celebration. It wasn't loud nor dramatic, but it was enough. The whale's breathing, once strained and shallow, now seemed easier. The tension that had gripped the whale's body, the weight that had burdened its movements, had been lifted, and in that quiet moment, the rescuers understood. The whale was still here. It was still alive. And perhaps for the first time in a long while, it felt the space to heal. As the final barnacle was carefully pried from the whale's back, the rescuers paused, letting the silence stretch between them and the enormous creature before them. The ocean had returned to its calm, vast self, as though it too was waiting for the next shift. For a long moment, the whale remained still in the water, its body now free from the oppressive weight of the barnacles, its breathing steady but slow. The team held their breath, wondering if the whale would attempt to swim away, perhaps retreating into the deep waters as wild creatures often do once their pain has eased. Instead, something surprising happened. The whale, despite its weakened state, moved gently, its great body shifting in the water with a grace that belied its size. It didn't lunge for the depths. It didn't flee in fear. Instead, it turned its head, the massive eyes meeting those of the rescuers. There was no visible emotion in the whale's gaze, but there was something profound, something unspoken. The rescuers stood frozen, their hearts caught between disbelief and awe. In the quiet stretch of time that followed, the whale made another movement, this time with purpose. It began to move toward the boat, not with urgency or panic, but with a slow, deliberate motion. The sea lapped at the sides of the boat as the whale's enormous body approached, its movements calm but determined. The team could scarcely believe what they were witnessing. They had expected the whale to retreat, perhaps to disappear back into the wild from which it had come. But this whale, weakened and vulnerable, had made a choice. It had chosen to stay close. It had chosen to trust them. One of the rescuers whispered softly, his voice barely audible over the lapping waves. "It's thanking us in its own way." The words were simple, but they carried an enormous weight. There was something deeply moving about this moment. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was quiet, understated, and yet it was everything. The whale paused just a few feet from the boat, its massive tail swishing gently in the water. It was not a gesture of submission nor one of dominance. It was a moment of shared understanding, an acknowledgement that the battle had been won together. The whale, for all its size and power, had chosen this fragile connection, choosing to remain near the humans who had given it a chance at survival. For a long time, the team simply stood in silence, letting the whale's presence wash over them. There was no rush, no need for words. They were in this quiet, sacred space together. Then, as if signaling the end of the interaction, the whale slowly turned its body and began to move away, its great tail lifting from the water in a graceful arc. It swam slowly at first, as though testing its strength, then gathered speed, its massive form cutting through the water with ease. The crew watched in awe, their eyes following the whale as it swam farther and farther away. The water glistened in the fading light, and for a moment everything was still. The whale disappeared into the vast ocean, its presence lingering in the hearts of the rescuers. They had been part of something extraordinary, a quiet but profound moment of connection between human and animal. It wasn't about the grand gesture of rescue. It was about the trust, the small signs that spoke louder than words, and the knowledge that, in some small way, they had given this creature another chance. The boat drifted slowly, gently back into the open sea. There were no celebrations, no triumphs, Just the soft hum of the engine and the quiet understanding that they had witnessed something rare. A whale. Free at last, swimming back into its home, and a rescue team forever changed by the moment of trust they had shared.